If you've ever waited for someone who promised they'd be there and then wasn't, you'll understand exactly how that night felt. It was my 38th birthday. Nothing fancy, just a quiet dinner, a small cake I baked myself, and a reservation at the restaurant where my husband and I had our first date. I even wore the same shade of red lipstick he once said made me look like home. By 7, the candles were ready. By 8, the food was getting cold. By 9, I got the text. "Sorry, meeting ran late, don't wait up." That was it. No happy birthday, no call, not even a fake excuse with heart emojis. Just corporate indifference from the man who used to leave me love notes on napkins. I remember staring at the message, wondering when my husband had turned into a man who manages my expectations. I told myself it was fine. He was busy. Meetings happen. But there's a particular kind of silence that hits different when you realize you're not waiting for traffic to clear, you're waiting for someone who doesn't want to come home. I set the table anyway. 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine, 1 empty chair. The house was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator pretending to keep me company. Emily, my 14-year-old, was at a friend's sleepover. Lucky her. She didn't have to see me pretending everything was fine. By 9:30, I blew out the candles myself. I didn't even make a wish. You don't make wishes when you already know they won't come true. The cake tasted like sugar and bad timing. I laughed, one of those small, sharp laughs that comes out when your emotions crash into each other and you can't decide if you're angry or pathetic. Then something strange happened. I felt calm. Not peaceful, just calm. Like my body had finally given up on pretending. That's the dangerous kind of calm, the one that comes right before clarity. I sat down at the kitchen table, looked at the half-melted candles, and realized something I probably should have seen years ago. I was in a marriage that only looked alive from the outside. We smiled in photos, held hands in public, played the part. But love? That had left the building long before he did. I don't know what hurt more, that he forgot my birthday, or that I wasn't even surprised. That's when I decided to stop lying to myself. Because once disappointment becomes predictable, it's not disappointment anymore. It's data. And that's what my husband didn't understand. I'm a teacher. I notice patterns. When people repeat behavior, I see it. When excuses start sounding the same, I remember them. And when someone stops showing up for you, you stop setting the table for 2. I poured the second glass of wine down the sink. It felt symbolic, but not dramatic. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just aware. And that's the first step no one warns you about, the moment you stop hoping they'll change and start realizing you can. That night, I cleaned the dishes, wrapped the leftover cake, and turned off the lights. The house looked the same as it always did, quiet, neat, predictable, but something had shifted. I couldn't name it then, but it was there. That quiet knowing that things would never go back to what they were, even if he came home tomorrow with flowers and fake remorse. I went to bed early. I didn't cry. I didn't scroll through social media to see if he posted anything. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how silence can be louder than any fight. And right before I fell asleep, I made a mental note, not about revenge, not even about leaving, but about remembering this feeling. Because someday, I'd need it. The stillness, the certainty, the proof that I could live through disappointment and not shatter. If you've ever had a moment like that, when you stopped begging for effort and started noticing the truth, leave a comment. I read every single one, and trust me, you're not the only one who's been there. And if you like real cheating stories that end with self-respect instead of tears, subscribe. We tell stories that don't glorify pain, they turn it into power. That night wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no fighting, no grand exit. Just one quiet birthday, one forgotten promise, and a woman realizing that silence sometimes says everything. The next morning, sunlight hit the kitchen table like nothing had happened. Same plates, same half-eaten cake, same silence pretending to be normal. I made coffee black, no sugar, and stared at the phone that hadn't buzzed all night. No, I'm sorry. No, happy birthday, nothing. Just proof that I'd been married to a man who could ghost his own wife. By habit, I still checked my email. That's when I saw it, an automated reminder from his company calendar. Dinner with client. The Crescent Hotel, 7:30 p.m. I froze for a second, then exhaled. He'd lied about being in a meeting. The Crescent wasn't exactly where people went to talk numbers. It was where they went to have affairs discreetly and bill it as networking. Heaven too. I clicked through his shared work calendar, something he never bothered to make private. Every entry looked normal until that one. Dinner with client. No client name, no company initials. Just vague enough to be innocent. Just specific enough to be dangerous. For a moment, I almost laughed. The audacity of using his work email to schedule a date. He'd grown so confident in my trust that he stopped hiding properly. That's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't sneak up on you. It grows quietly while you're busy defending the person doing it. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was work. Maybe he just didn't tell me because I'd asked too many questions. But deep down, that voice, the same one that told me to save screenshots when something feels off, was already whispering, "You know what this is." I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to watch how he'd play it. When he came home that afternoon, he looked like someone who just returned from vacation, not an all-night meeting. Freshly showered, same pressed shirt, tie folded neatly in his briefcase. He kissed my cheek like a man checking something off a list. "How was your meeting?" I asked casually. He didn't flinch. "Exhausting. The client's a nightmare." "Yeah?" I said, pouring him coffee. "Was the client staying at the Crescent Hotel?" That pause, barely 2 seconds, was everything. His smile faltered before he forced it back into place. "What? No? Why would you think that?" "Because your calendar says you had dinner there." He chuckled like I'd told a bad joke. "You really need to stop overthinking things, Caroline. Not everything's a conspiracy." Gaslighting. Classic move. I'd seen him use that tone on interns when they questioned his numbers, half humor, half authority, full manipulation. "Right," I said quietly. "Not everything's a conspiracy." "I too." He patted my shoulder like I was a nervous employee. "You should go out more, honey. You've been home too much. That's why these little ideas get in your head." I smiled. But inside, I was making another note, the kind that would later become evidence. Because once someone accuses you of being paranoid, it usually means they've got something to hide. He left for work like nothing had happened, humming under his breath. I cleaned the kitchen again, this time slower. Every movement felt deliberate. Wiping crumbs, washing plates, rinsing out the sink. It wasn't about cleanliness anymore. It was control. When the truth starts to crack, order becomes the only thing you can manage. At noon, I checked his social media, something I hadn't done in years. He'd posted a photo of team breakfast at a downtown cafe. I zoomed in. There she was, Alyssa Crane, new marketing associate. Blonde, 20-something, sitting too close, laughing too hard. I didn't need captions. I could read body language fluently. I stared at the photo for a long time, not out of jealousy but curiosity. What makes a man throw away everything for someone who still needs Google Maps to find her own apartment? That afternoon, I went back to teaching my online class like nothing was wrong. Fractions, decimals, equations, things that make sense when life doesn't. I watched the clock hit 3 and wondered if he was texting her. The thought didn't make me angry. It made me analytical. If this was the start of something, I wanted to know exactly how it began. Later that night, he came home with flowers. Cheap ones, grocery store kind, the kind you grab out of guilt. "Happy late birthday," he said, like that fixed everything. "Thank you," I said. "You remembered." He kissed my forehead again. Same empty affection, same performance. He had no idea I'd already seen more than he could explain away. That's the dangerous part of pretending. You never know when the other person has stopped pretending too. When he went upstairs to shower, I took the flowers, trimmed the stems, and put them in a vase. Then I noticed something on the receipt still attached to the wrapper. He'd bought them at 5:42 p.m. His meeting was at 7:30. He'd had time to stop for flowers before the lie. That detail stung more than the lie itself. It meant he planned the apology before he even hurt me. That's when I knew this wasn't a one-time thing. Men don't prepare guilt gifts for accidents. They do it for habits. I placed the vase on the counter, perfectly centered, and turned off the kitchen light. The reflection in the glass caught me by surprise. I looked calm, Too calm. But under that calm was something else. Something sharp. I didn't know it yet, but that calm would become my weapon. Because the moment I stopped reacting was the moment he lost control. The night stretched long, filled with small noises, the hum of the fridge, the click of the clock, the quiet sound of truth settling in. Somewhere upstairs, he was humming in the shower again. And downstairs, I was learning how to stop waiting for explanations and start collecting proof. I stopped setting 2 plates for dinner. Not out of anger, just efficiency. There's no point wasting clean dishes when someone's barely coming home. Every evening, he had a new work thing. New names, new deadlines, same tone. That rehearsed exhaustion of a man pretending to be noble for staying late at the office. The first real crack came on a Thursday. He'd left his laptop open on the counter while I was cleaning. The screen dimmed, then lit up again with a message preview. I wasn't snooping, he just made it too easy. Can't stop thinking about last night. No name, just a heart emoji, and the word A. I didn't need context. I didn't need to scroll. I closed the laptop and stood there, staring at the stainless steel toaster reflecting my face like some bad metaphor I didn't ask for. I wasn't shocked. I was simply confirmed. When he came home that night, I watched him the way you watch a rerun. You already know the ending, but you still notice the parts you missed before. He kissed me on the cheek, set his briefcase down, and smiled like he'd earned something. "Rough day," he said, loosening his tie. "Yeah," I said. "For both of us." "And?" He didn't notice the tone. Or maybe he did, but pretending not to hear was easier. That's when I realized the real danger in betrayal isn't the act itself, it's how ordinary the liar becomes while doing it. Over the next few days, I played the role of the calm, trusting wife. I laughed at his stories, asked polite questions about his clients, and even packed him lunch. Not out of love, out of data collection. I wanted to see how far the performance would go before it collapsed under its own weight. And then came Friday. He left his phone on the counter while showering. Notifications popped up faster than I could process. "Alyssa, I miss you already." Another, "Wish you were here instead of there." My thumb hovered for a second. I didn't open the messages. I didn't need to. The previews said everything. He came downstairs, towel around his neck, humming the same tune he always did when he thought life was under control. I smiled, poured coffee, and handed him his phone. Our fingers brushed. He didn't notice the shift in temperature. "Your phone's been busy," I said casually. He froze, just enough for me to see it, the split-second panic before the lie. Then came the smirk. "Work," he said. "You know how it is. Clients text at all hours." "Right," I said. "Clients who miss you at 11 p.m. "Oh." He met my eyes. "You're being dramatic." That line. The favorite weapon of every guilty man. I almost laughed. "You know," I said, "you might want to find a different phrase. You've used that one a few times lately." He shrugged, took a sip of coffee, and left without another word. But his silence said plenty. It said he thought I'd drop it, that I'd do what I always did. Let it slide, let it fade, let him win. The next week, his stories started contradicting themselves. Monday, conference call ran late. Tuesday, dinner with clients. Wednesday, stuck in traffic. The man was running out of lies faster than he was running out of gas. I started noticing little things. The faint perfume on his jacket that wasn't mine. The credit card charge from the Crescent Hotel bar, the same place from his meeting. A $186 tab. 2 people, 2 drinks, 1 mistake repeated. That night, I watched him scroll through his phone, smirking like a teenager. He didn't even bother hiding it anymore. And that's when it hit me, he wasn't afraid of getting caught. He was afraid of losing control. So I gave him exactly what he wanted, the illusion of control. When he said, "I'll be home late again," I smiled. "Of course," I said, "work hard." When he said, "You don't mind, right?" I replied, "I trust you." He didn't notice the pause between those words, the kind of pause that means I trust myself more. The next morning, I drove Emily to school, then stopped by a cafe downtown, the one across from his office. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, pretending to read. At 12:37 p.m., he walked out with Alyssa. I didn't flinch. I didn't follow. I just watched. They stood too close. She touched his arm. He smiled that smile, the same one he used when he proposed to me in this very city. I remember thinking, the irony of vows spoken near skyscrapers, promises built tall but hollow inside. I waited until they drove off, then finished my coffee. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just felt clarity. Not rage, not sadness. Just the sharp awareness that I'd been living next to a man who'd already emotionally packed his bags months ago. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Not to confront him yet, but to back up every bank statement, email, and expense record. If marriage was a partnership, then the audit had officially begun. That night, when he came home smelling like cologne that wasn't his, he leaned in to kiss me. I stepped aside. "Dinner's in the fridge," I said simply. He blinked, confused by the lack of confrontation. But I wasn't playing his script anymore. I wasn't the wife who begged for the truth. I was the woman writing the ending. While he reheated leftovers, I glanced at the reflection in the oven glass. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, just smaller in presence, like a man shrinking under the weight of his own lies. He didn't know it yet, but every meeting, every late night, every lie that started with, "It's just work," they'd all become receipts. Not for revenge, not for anger, but for freedom. And that, I realized, was the only kind of accounting that really mattered. By the end of that week, I stopped waiting for his lies to make sense. They were recycled now, barely edited versions of old excuses. He'd call from the driveway to say he was still at work, as if the car engine noise in the background was part of the business plan. I wasn't angry anymore, just focused. When you live with a liar long enough, you learn to collect information the way they collect alibis, quietly, neatly, without emotion. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a hotel keycard in his jacket pocket. The Crescent Hotel, again. Room 412. I turned it over in my hand, like it might explain itself. It didn't. I slid it into a small folder I kept in my desk drawer next to the printouts of bank transactions, the screenshots, and the email receipts. Every lie deserves its own label. He came home later that night, smelling like aftershave that could have been mine in another life. He hugged me loosely, the kind of half-hearted gesture you give to keep peace, not affection. "How was work?" I asked. "Busy. You know how it is," he said, already scrolling through his phone. "Yeah," I said, folding another shirt. "I know exactly how it is." He didn't even look up. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it walks in the door wearing your husband's face, eats dinner, and kisses your cheek goodnight like he's still yours. I stopped trying to catch him. I wanted to understand him instead. What made a man like Ryan risk everything for someone who didn't even know how to pronounce Chardonnay? Was it excitement? Ego? Or just the thrill of being wanted by someone too young to see through him? Saturday came. He said he had an early client meeting. I said nothing. I waited until I heard the garage door close, then got in my car and drove. The Crescent Hotel sat at the edge of downtown glass, marble, and secrets. I parked 2 blocks away, walked in through the side entrance, and went straight to the cafe. I ordered coffee and sat by the window facing the lobby. At 9:18 a.m., he walked in. No briefcase, no client, just Alyssa, wearing the same beige coat she had on in that team breakfast photo. They didn't even try to hide it. She laughed, touching his chest like they'd been doing this forever. I took a slow sip of coffee and felt nothing, just clarity. That's when I realized he hadn't broken my heart, he'd freed it. I didn't approach them. I didn't need the scene. I watched him pull out his wallet to pay. That was all the confirmation I needed. He used the joint card. I'd see it on the statement later. Some men bury their tracks, others send you the receipt. I walked out quietly, the sound of my heels steady on the floor. Each step felt lighter, sharper. I wasn't sneaking. I was collecting evidence of closure. That night, he came home late again, carrying takeout and false normalcy. "I picked up Thai food," he said, smiling like generosity could erase infidelity. "Perfect," I said. I've been craving something spicy. He didn't catch the double meaning. They never do. Over dinner, he told a story about a long day with clients, while I chewed slowly, nodding in all the right places. If he noticed my calmness, he mistook it for forgiveness. But what he was looking at wasn't calm, it was calculation. When he went upstairs to shower, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. There it was, the Crescent Hotel, $186, restaurant and bar. The timestamp, 9:40, 1 a.m. The man couldn't even cheat creatively. I downloaded the statement, highlighted the transaction, and saved it in the same folder. Proof. Financial. Every click felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When he came back downstairs, hair damp, smelling of clean guilt, he asked, "You okay?" I looked up at him, smiled softly and said, "I'm fine, just grading papers." He kissed the top of my head, walked away, and I remember thinking how strange it was how people can live entire double lives under the same roof and still ask if dinner's good. Later that night, while he snored beside me, I turned on my phone light and stared at him, not out of hatred, but study. Like observing a stranger who once had your trust, I whispered quietly to myself, "You have no idea who you're sleeping next to anymore." And for the first time, I didn't mean it like an insult. I meant it as a promise. The next morning, I packed Emily's lunch, drove her to school, and sat in the car afterward, thinking about what came next. Not confrontation, not revenge, just preparation. Because in the end, it's not about how loudly you react, it's how quietly you build your exit. I rolled down the window, breathed in the cold morning air, and smiled at the thought. He had no idea that every meeting, every "I love you," said on autopilot, every secret he thought he hid, was now neatly catalogued under one word: evidence. And evidence, unlike love, never lies. I didn't plan the letter. It wasn't some cinematic act of revenge. It began as a survival instinct. After days of pretending not to know, my mind needed order, something solid I could hold on to when every word out of his mouth was air. That morning, he left for a conference in Charlotte. I watched his car disappear from the driveway, the same way you watch a bad habit finally walk itself out. Then I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened a blank page. It wasn't rage that moved my hand. It was precision. Every word had weight, because every word was true. "Ryan, you've always said you admired how calm I stay during chaos. That calm wasn't peace, it was exhaustion. I've spent years managing your moods, your ego, your image. And while you were busy being important, I was busy remembering everything you thought I'd forget." I paused. The words weren't angry enough to hurt, but they were clean enough to scar. I know about the hotel. The charges, the receipts, the late-night texts. I know who she is and how long it's been. You might think I've been quiet because I'm scared, but you're wrong. I've been quiet because I wanted you to finish building your own rope. The letter became less about him, and more about clarity, the kind that only comes when you've stopped caring about being understood. "You once told me honesty was the foundation of our marriage. Turns out, you built the house on sand. But don't worry, I've already packed the valuables, the truth, the proof, and our daughter's respect." I signed it simply, "C." Then I slipped the folded letter into an envelope and placed it on his desk, right next to the folder labeled Q3 Financial Review. Fitting, considering how much of our marriage had turned into numbers time, excuses, transactions. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it. The sunlight hit the paper, soft and sharp at the same time. That's when it hit me. This was the last thing I'd ever write for him. Upstairs, I packed quietly. A few clothes for Emily and me, our documents, my teaching materials, and the flash drive, with everything he didn't know I had: bank records, screenshots, and statements. The proof of a man's double life could fit neatly into a folder, yet somehow it had taken years to collect. I called Emily's school to excuse her early, said we were visiting my sister for the weekend. I didn't have a sister, but that wasn't their business. When she came out, backpack swinging, she asked, "Is Dad coming too?" I smiled gently. "Not this time." She nodded, trusting me the way only children can, completely, without question. We drove out of town before sunset, the sky bleeding orange behind us. I didn't cry. There's a difference between sadness and freedom, and I was starting to recognize the second one. By the time Ryan came home that night, the house was spotless, quiet, and wrong. He called my name once, then again. Upstairs, downstairs, the same question echoing into the emptiness he'd created. I can picture it even now. The moment he walked into his office and saw the letter sitting there, the white envelope against the dark wood. The handwriting he'd seen on love notes now turned into his reckoning. He didn't call right away. That surprised me. He was probably still trying to calculate how much I knew and whether I'd gone public. The man could handle guilt, but not exposure. When the phone finally rang, it was almost midnight. His voice was low, calm, rehearsed. "Caroline, we need to talk." "We don't," I said. "I don't know what you think you found." "Don't finish that sentence," I interrupted. "You've lied enough for both of us." Silence. The kind that used to intimidate me. This time, it didn't. "Where are you?" he asked finally. "Somewhere quiet," I said. "You'll figure out what that means once you sit with yourself long enough." "How so?" He exhaled like a man who'd just realized his script no longer worked. "Caroline, please, we can fix this." "Fix?" I repeated. "You don't fix betrayal, Ryan. You document it." And then I hung up. The phone buzzed again. Once, twice, 10 times. I turned it face down and went to sleep in a small motel off the highway, my daughter breathing softly beside me. The hum of the air conditioner was steady, grounding. I'd never felt safer in a room that cost $62 a night. In the morning, I woke to sunlight cutting across the faded curtains. Emily stirred, mumbled, "Mom?" "Yeah, baby." "Are we okay?" I brushed her hair back. "We're better than okay." That's when I realized revenge doesn't always start with confrontation. Sometimes it begins with silence, a letter, and a woman who finally chooses her own peace over his comfort. Outside, cars passed on the highway, people going about their lives unaware that mine had just split clean in two, one half that used to wait, and another that had finally walked away. And between them, on a desk miles away, sat a folded letter that turned an ordinary night into the beginning of consequence. When he finally called my mother's house 2 days later, his voice didn't sound like the man I used to know. It sounded like someone realizing the mask had melted off in public. My mother handed me the phone with a look that said, "Don't say anything you'll regret." I didn't plan to. Regret was his department now. "Caroline," he said, the syllables tight. "We need to talk. In person." I could almost hear the panic he was trying to disguise with authority. "If it's about the letter," I said, "I don't need clarification. I think you misunderstood what you saw." I smiled to myself. "You mean the credit card statements? The hotel receipts? The text messages that read like middle school poetry?" His breath hitched. "You went through my things." "I went through our things," I corrected. "You just happened to leave your lies in the joint account." He went quiet. The kind of silence that comes when a man realizes charm won't work anymore. "I can explain everything," he said finally. "Don't," I said, lowering my voice. "Every time you explain, it costs me another year of trust. I'm out of balance." The line went dead. For a moment, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sorrow, just an odd calmness, like I'd finally stopped being part of someone else's cover story. Later that day, my friend Sarah, who also happened to be a divorce lawyer, called me. "You're not going back, are you?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm moving forward." "Then listen carefully," she said. "Do not call him. Do not text him. Let him panic first." "Why?" "Because men like Ryan don't crumble when you yell. They crumble when you stop giving them an audience." She was right. That night, my phone lit up with a dozen missed calls, then emails, then texts that tried every angle: apology, denial, manipulation. The man went from, "It meant nothing," to, "You're ruining our family," in under 6 hours. The next morning, his HR department emailed me, not him, me. Apparently, his assistant had filed a workplace complaint. Something about unprofessional conduct between Ryan and a subordinate. I almost laughed. Karma had better timing than any lawyer. I didn't reply to the email. I forwarded it to Sarah. Within an hour, she sent me a one-line text. "He's in trouble. Don't say a word. Let this play out." Meanwhile, Ryan tried to control the narrative. He called mutual friends, told them I'd overreacted, that we were just having a misunderstanding. People love to believe in misunderstandings. It makes betrayal sound more polite. But then the news spread faster than he could manage. The HR investigation became company gossip, and soon, misunderstanding turned into suspension pending review. By the end of the week, the man who once strutted into boardrooms now sat in his car, calling me from blocked numbers like a teenager hiding from curfew. I didn't pick up. I didn't have to. Watching someone drown in the consequences they built is best done from shore. He showed up at my mother's house on the 4th day. The porch creaked as he climbed the steps. I opened the door halfway and leaned against the frame, calm as glass. "You don't get to just disappear," he said. His eyes were red not from grief, from lack of control. "I didn't disappear," I said. "I just stopped orbiting around you. You're blowing this out of proportion, Caroline. You're hurt, I get it. But it didn't mean anything." I raised an eyebrow. "You risked your job, your marriage, and your daughter's respect for something that didn't mean anything?" He blinked, looking for the script that used to work on me. There wasn't one anymore. "I made a mistake," he said finally. "No," I said softly. "You made a pattern. Mistakes end. Patterns repeat." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What do you want from me? Money? An apology?" "Neither," I said. "I just want you to understand what it feels like to lose something you thought you'd always have." He didn't respond. For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize, not the kind that starts with "if I hurt you," but the kind that admits he was never the man he pretended to be. But the ego always shows up before the humility does. "This isn't over," he muttered. "It is," I said. "You just haven't caught up yet." "Ah." He left without another word, slamming the car door hard enough to make the porch lights flicker. That night, I watched the news while Emily did homework. A local report mentioned an executive under investigation for ethical misconduct. They didn't name him, but I didn't need them to. Emily looked up at me and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled. "Yeah, baby. For the first time in a long time, I actually am." The next morning, Sarah called again. "You ready for the next step?" "I already started," I said, looking at the folder of financial documents on the table. "Good," she said, "because he's about to find out that when a woman stops talking, it's not silence, it's strategy." And that's the thing Ryan never understood. The letter wasn't the end of our story. It was just the audit before the consequences. While he scrambled to rebuild his image, I was building my case quietly, methodically, with the kind of focus only betrayal can teach. He still thought he was controlling the narrative. He had no idea he was already part of the evidence file. The first Monday after he found the letter, the world finally started catching up to Ryan. I didn't have to lift a finger. Karma worked faster than any revenge plan I could have written. It started with a phone call from Sarah, her voice laced with the kind of satisfaction only justice delivers quietly. "He's been suspended," she said. 2 weeks, pending the HR investigation. Apparently, they found text messages between him and the marketing associate on a company device. "Alyssa," I said. "Yeah," Sarah replied. "She's not coming back either." I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. There was something sobering about seeing everything you once built together crumble in perfect order. It wasn't revenge, it was arithmetic. Actions plus arrogance equal consequence. That morning, I made pancakes for Emily. She asked if her dad was coming by. "Not today," I said. "He's taking some time off work." She nodded, dipping her pancake in syrup. "Is it because he's sick?" "In a way," I said softly. "But it's the kind of sickness you have to cure yourself." After breakfast, I checked my email. HR had copied me on a formal statement from his company, confirming the suspension. "Unprofessional conduct involving a subordinate" was the phrase they used. The kind of line that follows a man longer than a marriage ever could. He called me 3 times that afternoon, each voicemail sounding more desperate than the last. The first one was defensive. The second sounded guilty. The third was quiet, like he was finally talking to the silence he'd left behind. I didn't call back. By day 4, the story had leaked online. An anonymous post on a local business forum titled, "Corporate Scandal at Blue Ridge Energy Solutions." I didn't have to open the comments to know how it went. People who once envied him now dissected his downfall like it was a sport. Sarah called again. "The company's legal team reached out," she said. "They want to settle quietly if you agree not to talk to the press." "I'm not interested in the press," I said. "Just the truth." She laughed. "That's why this works, Caroline. You're not fighting for attention, you're fighting for peace, and that scares them more." For the first time, I realized how calm my voice sounded. That's what peace feels like. It doesn't shout. It just exists, solid and steady. Meanwhile, Ryan moved into a small apartment downtown. I knew because the bank statements still linked to our shared notifications. He spent money like guilt burned a hole in his pocket. Takeout, flowers, expensive bourbon, and a $900 urgent plumbing service. I could almost hear him trying to fix leaks in a life he'd built on cracks. Alyssa didn't stay. She deleted her social media and skipped town within a week. Office gossip said she'd filed a complaint claiming emotional manipulation. I didn't feel sorry for her, but I understood her type, the kind that confuses admiration with affection, then realizes too late that men like Ryan are only loyal to themselves. The irony was perfect. He used to say, "I can handle anything except bad press." Now he was the bad press. Still, I didn't gloat. There's a line between victory and dignity, and I wasn't crossing it. Instead, I focused on building what he'd broken. I re-enrolled in a continuing education program, something I'd put off for years because we were too busy. The truth was, he was too busy making sure I stayed small. That evening, while organizing bills, I got a message from the bank joint account withdrawal request, flagged for review. He was trying to access the funds. I smiled and forwarded the alert to Sarah. She handled it in less than an hour, freezing the account pending divorce proceedings. "Let him explain that to his bourbon supplier," she joked. Later that week, he showed up unannounced again. No suit this time, just a man in wrinkled clothes and the look of someone who'd finally met the mirror version of his own choices. "Caroline," he said, standing at the doorway. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "You have 2 minutes." He looked down, exhaling. "They suspended me, said it's under review, but it's over." "I know." He blinked. "You know?" "Yes, Ryan. HR copied me on the email. Perks of being the wife you forgot to delete from your corporate life." His mouth opened, closed again. He wasn't used to being the one without control. "I made a mistake," he started. "You keep calling it that," I said. "A mistake, like forgetting milk." But this wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy that finally failed. He rubbed his forehead. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said simply. "That's the part you don't understand. When someone like me stops wanting anything from you, that's when you should be scared." He tried to step closer, but I didn't move. "I can fix this," he whispered. "You can't fix what you broke in secret," I said. "You can only live with the silence it left behind." He stared at me like he didn't recognize the person in front of him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he never really knew me, just the version that made him feel powerful. When he left, I didn't watch him drive away. I just closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it for a moment. The air felt lighter. 2 weeks had passed since the letter, and the man who once believed he was untouchable now stood at the edge of his own unraveling. There's something poetic about that kind of collapse. It doesn't come with fire or screams. It comes with silence, missed calls, and the slow realization that the woman he underestimated was the calm before his storm. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night without waiting for the sound of his car in the driveway. The scandal broke on a Wednesday morning, around 8:17 a.m., when I was pouring Emily's cereal. It wasn't a headline in a newspaper or a dramatic exposé. It was quieter, messier, and far more humiliating for him. Sarah texted me first. "He's on Reddit." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Then came the screenshot. A thread titled, "My boss got caught having an affair with his assistant and tried to blame HR for entrapment." The post had over 1,000 comments in less than 2 hours. There was no name, but everyone in his industry knew exactly who it was. The details were too specific. The city, the company, the title, Vice President of Corporate Development. That was him. I scrolled through the comments while Emily hummed along to some cartoon jingle in the background. The world was roasting my husband, one anonymous sentence at a time. Some called him pathetic, others called him predictable. My favorite comment simply said, "The wife always finds out." I didn't feel joy reading it. I felt a strange, clean detachment like watching a storm destroy a house you no longer live in. By noon, the thread had spilled onto Twitter. People from the company were subtweeting quotes like, "Integrity starts at home. The PR team must have been working overtime." Ryan's name was trending locally by 4 p.m., which, in this city, meant your career was already done. I didn't call him. He didn't call me. But at 5:03 p.m., he showed up outside my mother's house again, this time in a wrinkled shirt and eyes so hollow, he looked like a ghost. Trying to remember what it felt like to be human. He didn't even knock. He just stood there on the porch, hands in his pockets, staring at the door like it might forgive him. I opened it a crack. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "Caroline, please," he whispered. "They're destroying me." "They're not destroying you, Ryan," I said quietly. "You did that all by yourself." His eyes darted toward the window, like he was afraid the neighbors would hear. "Can we talk inside?" "No," I said. "You've done enough talking behind closed doors." He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, like a man stripped of his title, his arrogance, and the illusion of control that used to hold him together. "I lost my job," he said finally, voice cracking. I didn't react. "They called it a resignation," he added, almost hopeful, like I'd pity him. I didn't. "Then I guess you're free to do whatever you want," I said. "That's what you've been chasing anyway, right? Freedom?" He flinched. "You don't have to be cruel." "I'm not being cruel," I said. "I'm being accurate." For a moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the porch railing. He ran a hand through his hair and muttered, "Everyone knows, Caroline. My friends, my coworkers, people are laughing at me." "That's what happens when your secrets grow legs," I said. "They learn to walk into daylight." He shook his head, tears forming. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't," I said softly. "That's the point." He looked at me like he wanted me to say something kind to save him from the wreckage he'd created. But the woman who used to fix his mistakes was gone. "Emily doesn't need to see you like this," I added. He straightened, trying to recover the posture of the man who used to control boardrooms. "You can't keep her from me." "I'm not keeping her from you," I said calmly. "I'm protecting her from who you've become." He stared at me, chest heaving, then turned and walked back to his car. The tires screeched as he pulled out of the driveway, but even the noise couldn't drown out the sound of everything collapsing behind him. That night, Sarah called again. "He's officially done," she said. Company issued a statement, "Zero tolerance for ethical misconduct." His name's not even on their website anymore. "Good," I said simply. "What's your next move?" she asked. "I don't need one," I said. "The truth is doing the heavy lifting for me." After I hung up, I went upstairs. Emily was asleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the old air conditioner. I stood by her door for a moment and realized something that made me smile, not the kind of smile that comes from revenge, but from relief. For the first time in years, there was no pretending. No stage smiles, no dinner table diplomacy, just honesty, painful, raw, but real. Before bed, I opened my laptop and reread the original letter I'd left on his desk. Every sentence still rang true. But now, I saw it differently. It wasn't just a goodbye, it was the start of accountability. When I closed the laptop, I noticed a message waiting in my inbox from an unknown number. The subject line said, "I'm sorry." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. That night, sleep came easily. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and the world finally felt quiet enough for peace to exist again. The funny thing about exposure is that it doesn't just reveal the liar, it frees the one who stopped lying to herself. He came back 3 nights later, uninvited again. I heard the knock just as I was finishing the dishes. This time, there was no anger in his voice, just something hollow, like the echo left after pride collapses. "Caroline," he said quietly through the door. "Please, I just want to talk." I considered ignoring him, but curiosity won. I opened the door just enough to see his face. He looked older, like the fallout had aged him 10 years in 1 week. There were dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled, his tie missing, the kind of look that said he'd been sleeping on regret instead of pillows. 5 minutes, I said. No lies. He nodded and stepped inside. He glanced around the living room like it was foreign territory. Maybe it was. The house no longer carried his scent or his presence, just a clean kind of quiet that didn't belong to him anymore. I saw the posts, he said. The ones about me. I'm sure you did. It's not all true. It tilted my head. Which part? The affair or the arrogance? He winced. You don't understand things with Alyssa, just happened. That's the line you're going with? I asked. It just happened? Like tripping into a hotel room and accidentally booking it twice? His shoulders sank. I was stupid. Yeah, I said. And confident about it. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. I lost everything, Caroline. My job, my reputation, my friends. I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, I said. He looked at me for a long time before answering. I thought I was missing something. I thought the excitement would make me feel alive again, but it just made me realize how empty I already was. It wasn't an excuse, it was an autopsy. And for the first time, I believed he actually saw what he'd done. Do you want me to feel sorry for you? I asked. He shook his head. No. I just want you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. Oh? That's the problem, I said softly. You never meant not to either. He looked down at the floor like a man trying to find his own reflection. I've been seeing a counselor, he said after a moment. They say I should take accountability. Then start by not turning that into a performance, I replied. Accountability isn't a speech. It's a lifestyle. He took a deep breath. I can't undo what I did, but I want to make things right for you and Emily. I'll sign whatever you need. The house, the account, whatever it takes. That's not generosity, I said. That's consequence. He nodded, his voice trembling slightly. I know. I just want you to know I'm sorry. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us wasn't angry, it was exhausted, the kind of silence that comes when the storm has finally spent itself. I looked at him, the man I'd once trusted with my life, my love, my birthday candles, and I realized something profound. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't forgive him, but I no longer needed to see him punished. Watching him exist in the ruins of his own decisions was punishment enough. He looked up again, eyes glassy. Is there any chance? No, I said, before he could finish. There isn't, and that's not cruelty. That's closure. He nodded slowly, tears finally spilling over. He wiped them quickly, embarrassed. I wish I'd understood you better, he said. I wish you'd respected me sooner, I replied. He laughed bitterly. You always had the last word. No, I said. You just stopped listening before I finished the first one. He turned toward the door, hand resting on the knob. Goodbye, Caroline. Goodbye, Ryan. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, but there was nothing left worth saying. When the door closed, it didn't slam. It clicked softly, finally sealing the space that had been open too long. I stood there for a moment, not crying, not smiling, just breathing. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim of his betrayal. I felt like a witness to his collapse and a survivor of my own silence. Later that night, I found Emily asleep on the couch with her homework spread across the coffee table. I covered her with a blanket, brushed her hair back, and whispered, "We're okay now." She stirred, half asleep. "Did Dad say sorry?" "Yes," I said. "Do you believe him?" I smiled faintly. "I don't need to." The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and opened my laptop. The divorce paperwork sat ready in my inbox, finalized by Sarah overnight. I read through every line clean, legal, unemotional. Then I signed. The signature didn't feel like an ending. It felt like permission. Permission to start again, to stop explaining, to stop carrying guilt that wasn't mine. Outside, the sun was rising, streaking through the window just enough to touch the edges of the kitchen table. the same table where I'd once waited for him to come home. Now it was just me, my coffee, and the quiet hum of freedom. And in that stillness, I realized something simple and undeniable: closure isn't an event. It's the moment you stop needing the apology to feel whole. The courthouse didn't look like a place where people found closure. It looked like a place where stories ended quietly. No applause, no tears, just signatures and silence. I sat across from Ryan at the long oak table, the divorce papers neatly stacked between us like a final exam neither of us had studied for. He looked different now. No suit, no polished shoes, no boardroom confidence, just a man stripped of every title he once used to define himself. He didn't make eye contact. His lawyer did most of the talking, filling the air with words like asset division and custody agreement. Sarah sat beside me, calm as ever. "We're not here to punish," she'd said before walking in. "We're here to balance the scales." Balance, that was the word that had carried me through every sleepless night since the letter. The judge reviewed the documents. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, looking up at me, "you're requesting full physical custody and primary residence of the family home?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, voice steady. "It's where our daughter feels safe." Ryan's lawyer adjusted his tie. "My client has agreed to that. However, we'd like shared decision-making on education and health." I nodded. "That's fine. As long as decisions are made with honesty." Ryan's lawyer hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed." The judge continued reading through the file. Each paragraph was a summary of what used to be a life: bank accounts, real estate, investments, insurance. Everything we'd once called ours, now being divided with surgical precision. When she reached the section on marital misconduct, Ryan shifted uncomfortably. The documentation was thorough: photos, statements, receipts. Sarah had called it airtight. I just called it truth on paper. "Given the evidence," the judge said, "spousal support will be awarded to Mrs. Hayes for a duration of 18 months. Ryan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Maybe he finally understood that silence was the only thing left to give. As the judge signed the decree, I felt no joy, no triumph, just quiet clarity. Marriage had once felt like a contract of love. Now it was a contract of closure. When we stepped out of the courtroom, Sarah squeezed my arm. "You did good," she said. "You stayed calm. That drives men like him crazy." "I'm not trying to drive him crazy," I said. "I'm just done driving myself there." Ryan followed behind us, slower, his expression unreadable. In the hallway, he stopped. "Caroline," he said softly, "can we talk? Just us?" I turned to Sarah, who gave me a knowing nod before stepping aside. He exhaled. "I don't know how we got here." I looked at him. "You do, Ryan, you just don't like the view." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I thought you'd fight harder to keep us." "I did," I said. "You just weren't watching." He looked down, nodding slowly. "I'm sorry." "I know. Do you believe me?" "No," I said gently. "But that's okay. I don't need to anymore." Heaven's sake. For a moment, we just stood there. Two people who had once built a life together, now separated by everything invisible. "You're really done, huh?" he asked. "I was done the moment you made me feel small for asking for honesty." He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to start over." "You'll figure it out," I said. "You're good at pretending." That one landed. I could see it in his eyes, the understanding that he'd become the villain in his own narrative. He nodded and started to walk away. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to call him back. There's a moment when empathy ends and self-respect begins. I'd finally reached it. Outside, the air felt lighter, the kind of crispness that makes you believe in second chances. Sarah caught up to me on the steps. "It's done," she said, handing me the final copy of the decree. "Feels strange," I said. "Like I just ended a movie that's been playing too long." "Yeah," she said, "but now you get to write the next one." That night, I drove home with the windows down, letting the wind drown out the noise in my head. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light flicked on automatically. It was the same light I used to leave on for him. Now it felt like it was welcoming me instead. Inside, Emily was drawing at the kitchen table. She looked up, smiling. "Mom, are we really keeping the house?" "We are," I said. She grinned. Can I paint my room? You can paint it any color you want. She paused. Even purple? Especially purple. She laughed. That unguarded kind of laughter kids have before life teaches them caution. I leaned against the counter, watching her color. That house had once been a stage for pretense. Now it was just a home again. Hours later, when she went to bed, I sat alone at the same kitchen table where everything had started: the missed birthday, the cold dinners, the letter. The difference was the silence. It didn't ache anymore. It soothed. I looked around and thought about all the ways people measure success: titles, money, status. I had none of that left from him. But what I did have was something far rarer: peace that didn't require permission. The divorce didn't make me happy. It made me honest with myself, with my past, and with what I wanted from the rest of my life. And for the first time, the thought of being alone didn't scare me. It felt like a clean page, waiting for the next line. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, life started to look unfamiliar in the best way possible. The mornings were quieter, but not empty. The kind of quiet that lets you think without the weight of someone else's mood hanging over you. I woke up, made coffee, opened the windows, and for the first time in years, didn't feel like I was performing normalcy. People like to say you move on, but that's not really what happens. You move through. You drag yourself through the memories, the doubts, the guilt that doesn't belong to you, until one day you realize you're no longer dragging anything at all. You're just walking. I took a few weeks off from teaching and started volunteering at a local community center. They ran a small cooking program for single parents: cheap meals, shared laughter, and a chance to talk about everything no one posts online. It felt good to teach something again, even if it wasn't math this time. One of the women in the group, Denise, told me, "You've got a calm way about you, like someone who's been through the fire and decided to build a kitchen there." I laughed, but she was right. The calm didn't come from forgiveness. It came from clarity. There's power in knowing exactly what you survived. That's where the idea for Second Chance's Kitchen came from. It started as a joke between the volunteers. "Caroline, you should open your own class." But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. A place where women like me could rebuild not just their confidence, but their independence. By spring, I'd rented a small space downtown. Nothing fancy: pale yellow walls, 4 stainless steel tables, and a hand-painted sign that said, "Second Chance's Kitchen, cooking, confidence, community." Sarah helped with the legal paperwork, of course, and my mother insisted on painting the front door herself. The first class was small: 5 women, 1 old stove, and a playlist of quiet jazz. We made chicken pot pie, the kind of comfort food that fills a room before it fills your stomach. Somewhere between the chopping and the laughter, I realized I wasn't thinking about Ryan. Not his name, not his choices, not the mess he left behind. Just flour, laughter, and women learning they still had flavor left in their lives. One of them, a young woman named Jasmine, was in the middle of her own divorce. She told me she hadn't cooked since her ex criticized her for doing it wrong. That night, she pulled a perfectly golden pie out of the oven, looked at it like it was a medal, and whispered, "He doesn't get to have this anymore." I smiled. That was the entire mission right there. Reclaiming small joys from the people who convinced us they weren't worth having. Word spread faster than I expected. By the 3rd month, local papers were running little features: "Teacher turns betrayal into business. From broken to bold, the woman behind Second Chance's Kitchen." When the reporter asked what inspired me, I said, "A quiet dinner I ate alone." Sometimes, loneliness isn't a punishment, it's a blueprint. End of quote. Every week, I'd unlock the door before class, turn on the lights, and breathe in that faint mix of vanilla, detergent, and freedom. The women would trickle in laughing, venting, sharing stories that all sounded different but felt the same. One evening, while cleaning up after class, I got a message from Ryan. I hadn't heard from him in months. The subject line said, "Congratulations." He'd seen an article about the kitchen. His email was polite, formal, almost apologetic. He wrote that he was happy I found my purpose, and that he'd been doing better lately. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. There was nothing to respond to. You don't need to reply to ghosts who show up only to remind you they still exist. Instead, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat on the front step of the kitchen, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere out there, people were making the same mistakes I once made, believing love could survive without respect, that silence was peace, that endurance was virtue. But endurance without self-respect is just captivity with better wallpaper. I thought about the version of myself who used to wait by the window, counting headlights in the driveway, hoping one of them would belong to him. If she could see me now running a business, raising Emily, laughing without fear, she'd probably cry from relief. Emily loved the kitchen too. She'd come in after school, help wash dishes, and sneak extra cookies when she thought I wasn't looking. One evening she asked, "Mom, do you ever miss him?" I didn't hesitate. "No," I said. "I miss who I thought he was. But I don't miss living my life like it was someone else's idea." She nodded, like she understood more than I expected. "You're stronger now," she said. I smiled. "So are you." Later that night, after closing up, I walked through the empty space, turning off lights one by one. The last switch clicked, leaving the faint glow of the sign outside reflecting on the glass. Second Chance's Kitchen. It wasn't just a name, it was the truth of my life. Because second chances don't come from other people. They come from the moment you stop waiting for an apology and start building something better with your own hands. And as I locked the door and stepped out into the cool night air, I realized that maybe peace wasn't quiet after all. It just spoke a different language. One made of laughter, resilience, and the sound of your own footsteps moving forward. It's strange how peace sneaks up on you. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or apologies. It just shows up one morning, quietly sitting beside your coffee cup like it's been there all along. A year had passed since the night Ryan left me alone on my birthday, and somehow that night no longer hurt. It just existed a timestamp in my life that no longer defined it. Second Chance's Kitchen had grown. We had new stoves, more students, and even a small waiting list. Local news called it a space where women turned survival into skill. I didn't correct them. Survival was a skill one I'd mastered the hard way. On my 39th birthday, I arrived early to prep for class. The women had insisted on throwing me a small celebration, complete with cupcakes and a playlist they made themselves. I laughed when I saw the candles. "You know I have a complicated history with birthdays," I said. "Exactly why we're fixing it," Denise replied, handing me a lighter. So I lit the candles, all 39 of them. The last time I'd done that, I was alone in a kitchen full of silence. Now, the room was alive with voices, warmth, and the smell of vanilla frosting. When I blew them out, I didn't make a wish. I just whispered, "Thank you." Later that afternoon, while cleaning up, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The preview read, "You don't have to respond. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." It was Ryan. I opened it. The message was long, almost painfully sincere. He said therapy had forced him to look at who he'd been, that he finally understood the weight of his choices. He admitted he'd lost everything he thought mattered, and only then realized what actually did. "I know you don't owe me anything," he wrote, "but I wanted you to know that you were right about everything. You didn't lose me that night. I lost you long before that." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't. That's how I knew I was healed. The words didn't sting. They didn't warm me either. They just landed softly, like dust on a table you'd already cleaned. I typed back, "I wish you peace." Then I deleted it. Not out of spite, but because silence said it better. That night, I drove to the small overlook just outside of town. It had become my quiet place, the spot where the city lights looked like 1,000 tiny chances flickering in the distance. I sat on the hood of my car, wrapped in a cardigan, and thought about how differently things had turned out from what I once imagined. There was no revenge plot, no dramatic confrontation, no movie ending where the hero gets everything back. Just a woman who lost what wasn't real and found something much better, herself. Emily called while I was there. "Mom, are you coming home soon?" "Yeah, sweetheart. Just watching the view for a minute." "It's pretty?" "It is," I said, "but not as pretty as the quiet." She giggled. "That sounds like something you'd put on a mug." She wasn't wrong. When I got home, she was sitting at the dining table, sketching designs for her art project. She looked up and smiled. Did you have a good birthday this time? The best one, I said, because I didn't wait for anyone to make it good for me. She nodded, proud, and handed me a small envelope. I made you something. Inside was a hand-drawn card that said, "You didn't lose anything, Mom. You just made space for better things." I hugged her tighter than words could ever say. That was the real ending of this story, not the letter I'd written to Ryan, but the one my daughter gave to me. Over the following weeks, I found myself talking to women who came through the kitchen about more than food. We talked about rebuilding, boundaries, and the power of quiet exits. I told them, the best revenge isn't revenge. It's rebuilding a life so peaceful that they can't find a place in it anymore. Ode. Sometimes, after class, I'd stay behind, wiping down the counters long after everyone left. There was something comforting about closing up the kitchen alone, like reclaiming the silence that used to haunt me. Only now, it didn't echo. It rested. On the anniversary of the letter, the exact date I'd left it on his desk, I found myself sitting in the same spot where I wrote it. Different house, same wooden table. The irony wasn't lost on me. I took out a blank piece of paper, not to write to him, but to write for me. Dear me, you made it. Not through luck, but through clarity. You stopped begging for truth from liars, stopped apologizing for being too much, and started becoming exactly enough. You turned pain into purpose, silence into peace, and endings into beginnings. You are not what he did to you. You are what you built after he was gone. I folded the paper and tucked it into a drawer, next to the original letter, the one that started it all. For the first time, I realized those two letters were bookends. The first ended a chapter. The second confirmed I'd written a new one. When I turned off the lights and walked to my room, the house was quiet again, but it wasn't lonely. It was full of something better, proof that peace doesn't need noise to be powerful. And as I lay in bed, I thought about that night, long ago, the cake, the candles, the waiting. I smiled. Because in the end, he was right about one thing. That night did change everything. He just never realized it changed me for good. If stories like this speak to you, real cheating stories, revenge stories, and tales of husband betrayal where strength looks like silence, subscribe to the channel. Because here, we don't just tell stories of heartbreak. We tell stories of women who turned pain into power and peace into their final word.